Well, I'm here with Chef AJ again, and we're working on her book, Unprocessed. And you can see my little tabs. I researched it well. And she's got one section on there in the book called the yabbut series.
Mhm.
And this one is the yabbut number 3. Yeah, but I can't live without my whatever.
Fill in the blank. Yep.
Fill in the blank. So, what was hard for you to give up?
Sugar. That was sugar. It was sugar. Everything. Oil was easy. Salt
Yeah.
was easy. Animal products were super easy,
Yeah.
but sugar, flour was easy. That was my poison. And it literally is poison. And everybody has some, not everybody, but people that can't give something up. It's usually something processed. It's not usually like we don't hear people saying, well, I just can't live without arugula. I just can't live without okra.
No.
It's sugar or flour or alcohol or salt or oil or animal products. So it's generally something hypercaloric, hyperpalatable, generally something processed, like cheese. Cheese is an animal product
Right.
and a processed food.
Oh my
And
God. So, have you read
yeah,
the Neil Bernard's book?
great book. I'm
Oh
so
my
glad.
God.
It's so much easier to explain now. I can say, well, read this book.
Yeah, no.
So it generally is something addictive. I mean, let's, caffeine, coffee, most people say, oh my God, I just can't give up decaf coffee. I mean, maybe there are some, but it's generally when you can't give something up, it's because it's either actually addictive or it has an addictive component for you. Maybe psychologically addictive. You can't give it up. And it's hard. It's really hard. And
Oh, I know.
yeah,
Salt. Salt was my biggest one. And
yeah,
I mean, if you put a bowl of potato chips, Cape Cod potato
yeah.
chips
Oh,
in
yeah.
front of me,
Mhm.
or the Frito-Lay corn chips, don't get between me and the bowl because you'll
Right.
get hurt.
Yep.
I mean, you will.
Absolutely. Yep.
So, and I try not to have those in my path, but if they are, I
Yep.
have a hard time. I really do.
Right.
And
Again,
still
but
today.
they're processed. And
Yeah.
and the thing is, it's generally it's something that's really highly addictive, like caffeine or alcohol, which not for everybody is addictive, by the way, but for people that say I can't give it up, it probably is. But it's usually
Yeah.
some combination of sugar, fat, and salt. You don't usually hear from people saying, well, I would do this diet, but I just can't stop eating Twizzlers. It's usually something with sugar and fat,
Right.
or it's something with fat and salt, like you just said, potato chips. Most
Oh my
people
God.
don't want to eat things like French fries, potato chips, or even air pop popcorn when there's no salt. So when you have the salt with the fat, or the sugar with the fat, or the sugar, fat, and salt together, all three of those components, I call in my book the evil trinity: sugar, fat, and salt. They're all addictive on their own, but when
Right.
you put them together and layer and load them into processed food and restaurant food, they become hyper palatable and even more addictive. And that's generally the foods that people struggle with,
Well,
not
Michael
foods
Moss
found in
wrote that
nature.
book, Fat, Sugar, Salt, and
Absolutely.
he did an
Great book.
expose on the food industry and
Mhm.
how they're adding higher amounts of fat,
Than you
sugar, salt to the
than you
processed
ever
food to
right.
make them more addicted, in
More than
hitting
you'd
that.
more than you would ever use at home.
Oh,
And I was
yeah.
just watching a YouTube about that, and the food journalist was saying that at home you might use a half a teaspoon of salt, like when making the soup for your family.
Hmm.
But if you buy a can of soup, one serving, there's a half a teaspoon in that one serving. So they do. Dr.
Yeah.
McDougall, I remember the first time I saw him in 2009 when I spoke at his Celebrity Chef weekend. He had his soups there, and people were saying, well, there's so much salt, and he said, no salt, no sale. It's true. People
Right.
won't buy food without salt in it. But if you're going to use salt, I always say do it like Dr. McDougall says. Don't cook with it. Add it to the surface of your food,
Add
where
it at the end.
taste buds on the
Right.
yeah, at the end, at the finish. Because when you cook with sugar, salt, or oil, it just dissipates anyway. So if you're going to use these things, use them at the end where you can really taste them.
So, what is the definition of an addict?
Different people will tell you different things. I look at it as an addict is a person that continues with a behavior even though it is known to cause them harm. And that harm could be physiological harm
Hmm.
or physical harm. It could be psychological harm. So that's how I look at it. I'm sure there's more technical definitions in the scientific literature, but I look at it as somebody that can't stop doing something that they say they want to do.
Hmm.
I mean, you could say I'm addicted to my dog. I love dogs and I never not want to have dogs, but I don't think it's a physiological
Right.
addiction. But
Right.
I think things like caffeine and sugar for some people and alcohol for some people, when there is so much discomfort in not doing the behavior or even thinking about not doing the behavior, I think that there could be somewhat of an addiction at play. But
Right.
addiction, it exists on a continuum. Even people that are alcoholics, there's the kind of alcoholics that are naked under the Golden Gate Bridge, and there's the kind of alcoholics that can work all day at their job and then
Yeah.
drink into the night. And I think it's the same thing with food addictions. It's we all have different vulnerabilities, and at different times in our lives we're more or less vulnerable. But again, it's funny because of the t-shirt I'm wearing today, because I'm doing Weight Loss Wednesday.
Okay.
I don't know if you know what this chemical symbol is, but that's the chemical symbol
Yep.
for dopamine. And all these things, whether it's even things that are not food and drugs, things like shopping or gambling or sex, all these things, all these behaviors or foods or drugs that people are addicted to are things that not generally, they don't exist in nature. And they're things that cause an artificial stimulation of dopamine in the brain. And I think what people, at least what Dr. Goldhammer has taught me, is that they get addicted to this artificial stimulation of dopamine, which is why they want to keep continuing the behavior. But the problem is it takes more to get less effect, because they
Right.
habituate to whatever that drug-like effect is. And it is hard. And I think most people are addicted in this world. They do these that documentary Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead. I always thought they should do one, Fat, Sick, and Addicted, because I really do think there's an addiction going on, because the foods that are causing the problems, people don't want to acknowledge as addictive. They don't even, many experts in the plant-based world won't even acknowledge that food addiction is real, because you can't be addicted to food, which is true, but you can be addicted to certain foods like sugar and flour in general. But the foods that people have trouble with are readily available, easily affordable, socially acceptable. I mean, almost everybody, not in my world, but in my past life, everybody I know is perfectly normal to start your day with a cup of coffee and end your day with a glass of wine. Not a judgment here, but both these things are addictive. Different people are more addicted, but people that drink coffee, they can't not drink coffee. They can't. And there is a physical addiction to the caffeine. And there's also psychological things. I mean, there's comfort in rituals, things like that. But, like I said, I don't know anybody that goes out at midnight to 7-Eleven because they got to have broccoli sauce. So it is hard. And when people say, I could never give up blank, to me, whatever that blank is, that you're addicted to it then. Because I bet you if I, gave you $1 million, you might be able to, but it's still going to be hard.
Yeah.
It's very, very hard, especially because everybody else is doing it and saying it's okay and it's considered normal.
I know. It is tough. Oh my gosh. Just to break that addiction. And if you slip or slide, it's like it opens Pandora's box. And
right, you sink right back into that hole. That's why relapse is really a bitch, and that's why I tell people abstinence is bliss. It's much easier to stay compliant than to keep trying to get compliant. It's interesting because some of these addictions, like nicotine, when you talk to people that smoke, they really don't get pleasure from the actual smoking. They really don't. But what they do is they avoid the discomfort of the detoxification withdrawal from not having their nicotine.
Right.
I mean, people that drink coffee seem to like, if there's the addictive thing, but they like the smell and the taste. But with cigarettes, no, it's not even pleasurable. It's they're addicted. And if they don't smoke, they feel bad. And the same thing can happen with processed foods like sugars and flours and, of course, alcohol, is that you don't get as much pleasure from doing them as you did when you first did it. But not doing it causes so much pain from the detoxification withdrawal. And most people aren't willing to go through a period of discomfort for something greater. And I remember when I first detoxed from sugar, January 6, 2003, it was in a live-in clinic. I was at the Optimum Health Institute because I hadn't heard of True North then. And for 8 days, for 6 of the 8 days, I cried every day. I had vomiting and diarrhea and bloating and nausea. I mean, it was, and shaking. I mean, and you tell me it's not addictive, then what's that about? It's comfort of the withdrawal and detoxification is so great that most people aren't willing to go through it. And that's why I stay abstinent, because I don't want to ever go through
Oh my
withdrawal
God. Well, how do we
again,
break this
really.
addiction?
You go to True North and fast. Serious. I don't know. Well, let me put it this way. That doesn't break the addiction. There's things you have to do, like be in a support group, like My Ultimate Weight Loss Program or your group. That doesn't necessarily break it. I don't think you can necessarily break an addiction.
Manage it.
I think you can manage an addiction. And so you do that a day at a time, a meal at a time, a bite at a time. You do it by being in a support group of like-minded people. You do it by engaging in health promoting behaviors, not just the clean eating, but exercising and meditation and any other kind of stress reduction techniques. It is not easy. It's not easy. But you do it a day at a, really, that's the most you can do, is a day at a time. So I don't know if you ever just break an addiction. I think you manage an addiction, because I tell people all the time, I don't go around saying I'm a food addict, because I don't want to perpetuate that. But I think I'm a food addict in recovery because my body has changed by feeding it the right food, but my brain hasn't. 50 years overweight or obese. I mean, it's still there. And like you said, for me, it's not chips. I've never cared for salt, but if I was in I don't know, the Keebler cookie factory, I don't know, and probably aren't vegan, but the idea is like, I don't go to those places. Like we were just at Universal Studios. I had friends in from Baltimore, and they have this candy store there. And believe me, I didn't go in it because I mean, it'd be like, they have ever since I stopped eating sugar, there's been more candy invented that I've never had. I don't, just like if you're an alcoholic, you don't go to bars after you recover. You don't hang out with the old gang that used to drink. But I think having support is one of the things that has been shown that really, really helps. Support of like-minded people that are going through the same thing as you, that understand it and understand that when you're breaking an addiction, it's not a straight road to recovery. People see my result and they go, oh, well, she's skinny bitch. What does she know? They don't, unless they watched my lecture at
That's
Dr.
a great one, by the way. I love that.
Yeah. Right. From fat vegan to skinny bitch. They don't know that it not only wasn't linear, it was more like most of the life was like this and then like this and like this. And so, you just keep doing the best you can. Most people will relapse or not, or slip or fall off the wagon, whatever word you use. The thing is you keep trying. You keep getting
you make the next meal
dust the crumbs.
Count.
Right, exactly. Make the next, and that's where, when you say about breaking addiction, what helps about going to True North is people have this conception that, okay, well, I'm going to fast and get skinny. No, they don't fast you to lose weight. What they do is, the reason they fast you, well, there's many reasons. People fast for high blood pressure and diabetes. I'm not talking about people with lifestyle disease. I'm talking about people with food addiction or obesity. What fasting does is it helps you neuroadapt quicker, so that the kind of diet style that I recommend in the Ultimate Weight Loss Program and that Dr. Goldhammer recommends, whole food, plant-based, SOS-free, sugar, oil, salt-free, actually tastes really good. And so, like you said, salt is the hardest. Even though I was a sugar addict, salt was the last thing to go and the hardest. But what makes it easier is when you fast, your taste buds really become heightened. And so that when you do refeed, you really taste the salt in the greens. And so that's why people do it. It doesn't necessarily break the addiction. It just makes this unpleasant process of detoxification a little bit smoother, because you're in an environment of rest, you're having medical care, you're with like-minded people. But whether I interviewed a guy named Dr. Lance Dotis. A lot of people don't like his work. Some do. They resonate with it. He actually wrote a book called Breaking Addiction. He has another take. So I think people should do what resonates with them. But I do think that if you are addicted to something, you really have to understand you have to be abstinent. And that's what cracks me up, is when people, not cracks me up, that's a terrible word. It doesn't crack me up, but it makes me, I wonder when people have addiction and they go to programs that perpetuate the addiction. Yeah. Does that make sense? So if you're an alcoholic and you go to AA, you got to stop drinking. You don't look for a group that lets you drink in moderation or weigh and measure, your vodka in a thimble. So I think the first step is acknowledge it and aware. But even then, I remember when I was little, there was a cigarette commercial. I can't remember the name, but it said, I'd rather fight than switch. And I get letters from people, not letters anymore, emails from people every day, asking me for help, and I say what needs to be done. And they literally, and I'm not kidding, say, I would rather die than stop eating blank. And it's, that's your choice. It's sad. And I know it's difficult, but you just keep on keeping on, and you eat more starch meals and more green vegetables, and you do all that good stuff, so that if some of that bad stuff sneaks in, maybe the impact's less.
I use an analogy of stepping on a nail. Because you step on a nail, now I can put a Band-Aid on it, okay, but you're still going to feel the pain. You're still going to have the problem of that. Or you can take and you try to pull it out, and let's say the nail breaks and you leave part of it in. Yeah. So you go part way and we put the Band-Aid back on, but you're still going to have pain because you still have this issue that you haven't dealt with.
Right.
So you're right. You have to get it all the way out and get that nail out, put the Band-Aid on, go through the healing process, and then you can walk normal again. It's that
Right. And some
process.
people pull it out really slowly. And I think that actually hurts
I
more.
know.
It's sort of like some people cut down. They'll say, well, I'll use less sugar. I'll use less salt. I'll use less oil. And that may be fine if you're not overweight and if you're not an addict, then that could be absolutely fine. But if you are, when you keep the things in that you're personally addicted to, it just keeps teasing you. It keeps you stuck in the pleasure
Right.
trap and wanting more and more of these things. And that's why everybody's got to know their own poison. I don't tell everybody that people go, oh, Chef AJ is so strict, so absolute. They don't really know me if they say that, because they see the broad strokes of my program. They don't know how I work with people individually. If somebody doesn't have high blood pressure and doesn't have a problem with salt, then maybe they don't need to go
Right.
salt free. But if you're overweight and have high blood pressure and are struggling and eating way more food because you keep salting it, then maybe you are somebody that would do better not having it. And what I tell people is, look, when people say, oh, well, I can't do this for the rest of my life. And I'm like, well, I can't do anything for the rest of my life. I don't even know, what's going to happen tomorrow. But most people can do things for a brief
Right.
period of time, like say 21 days. And so we say, okay, try it for 21 days, see how you feel. If you hate it, on day 22, you can go back. With that holiday, I believe Lent is 40 days or something like that. And a lot of people give up things they love, like coffee or alcohol or chocolate for that. So if let's do it for 21 days, like Dr. Doug Lisle says, let's run an experiment. A lot of times what happens is people do okay in the 21 days. Not only okay, they do great. They lose weight, they lower their blood pressure, they feel better, and they can continue. But I think what makes it so hard is the environment, because we weren't designed to solve this problem of excess like we have now. And because most of our friends and families aren't doing it, we feel sometimes isolated and alone. Again, going back to why it's so important to have a group. So I think it's, I hate to say it's a lifelong problem, but it does require managing. I've heard some of the doctors say that you'd be more likely to cure yourself of cancer than obesity.
I know.
And
It's a struggle.
and
It is a
that's sad,
struggle.
but it's true, because so you got to keep on keeping on. I think making it a priority helps, having the goal of health more than
Yes.
weight loss, I think
Well, you got to
helps.
know your
I
why.
think weight loss, I think so too. I think when people come in and they go, I don't know, I just want, well, or I want to lose weight for my daughter's wedding. And I'm like, okay, well, we'll facilitate that goal. And I guarantee starting at the wedding night, you're going to gain it all back. So I think when people have the goal of optimum health, or maybe, wanting to be there for their family, their children, their grandchildren, to walk their daughter down the aisle, when we can get them like really involved in something more joyous. Dr. Dean Ornish always says people will do more to sustain joy than to just, alleviate. You tell people, well, you're going to get fat, sick, and die. It's not really inspiring. And people are like, well, I know that. We're all going to die. And so, again, finding ways to motivate people towards joy, and I think a lot of times when they start feeling better, they want to do it more. And that's why if they could go to a place like the McDougall 10-day program, again, like-minded people getting in the right environment.
And developing a new
North,
circle of friends. Yep.
You have to.
Developing
my
that
gosh.
new circle of friends makes a huge difference.
Tony Robbins says, and let's hope I get this right, that the quality of your life is determined by the expectation of your peer group. And if your peer group doesn't expect much from you, then pretty soon you will expect even less of yourself. And it's true. We are so influenced by those around us. And I remember Dr. Ornish was speaking at the Plantrician Conference last year, and he said that obesity is contagious, that we're more likely to be overweight or obese, 40% more likely if our friends are overweight or obese than even a direct blood relative. And that just shows you how powerful it is, because, it's like, thin girls seem to travel in packs and heavy girls seem to travel in packs. And it's because of the behavior, the lifestyle behavior, what they're doing to make them either slender or make them overweight. So never underestimate how powerful your peer group is with this. That's why join your program. Join, if you want to, join my program where people are doing these health promoting lifestyle behaviors that are going to lift you up instead of bring you down.
Well, just like any addiction, you've got, you're going to go through withdrawal. You're going to be releasing toxins that have been embedded in your fat. What did you do to help you get through that?
I had to go away from my environment. I couldn't do this if I was at home working. I had to be in an environment of rest. So then it was 2003. I went to the Optimum Health Institute. Now, because I know of True North and the McDougall program, I would recommend those. But you got to, I don't want to say you got to do it. You don't have to do anything. It's not court ordered, but it does help if you're in a place where you can get medical care and know that, hey, you're going to be okay. This is normal. That, like most alcoholics can't just do it at home. They have to go to a rehab, and it's the same thing for food. I think of it as food jail or food rehab. And you know what? Just like somebody that is a career criminal, you don't always get to go to jail once and get released. Sometimes you have to go back. And, I know Dr. Lau calls True North, the food jail, but, and there's no shame in it, because that's you, each time you build that muscle and it gets easier and easier. The thing is you got to continue the behaviors you learn in these locked up places when you get out. And that is what's so hard, because our environment does not support us. Even if we're lucky enough, like you and I, to have husbands that support us, not all of our family members do, not all of our friends do, but the world at large. I never to this day understand, when I go to the hardware store to buy nails, why there's candy at a hardware store, why there's candy at a pet store. I understand why there's candy at a candy store, because it's called a candy store. So you can't get away from the crap. You absolutely, it's almost like you need a suit of armor. And that suit of armor for me is the greens and the potatoes. I that's how I protect myself, because it's rough out there. And then if you got, all these other things, like people have, emotional things like we all do, sadness or loneliness or anger or grief, or, and then it's like, these are the foods that make us feel better. We're using food to change our emotional state. We're not using arugula. And it's being human is a hard job. It's a full-time job. Or you can do what I do when things get rough. I just go to esteemdynamics.org and I book a private session with psychologist Dr. Doug Lyle, who gets me, thinking straight. And
he's amazing.
You do the best you can. And, you read books like The Pleasure Trap so that you can understand why you're living in a world that's designed to make you fat, sick, and miserable, and what you can do about it. But even with the knowledge, it doesn't mean it's going to be easy. So people have to understand, no, it's not easy, but it's doable. And at first, like when I started the Ultimate Weight Loss Program 7 years ago, and the only success story I knew was myself and Shada, this was 6 years ago. I waited till I was thin for 2 years before actually rolling the program out to others. But as I see more and more people doing it, I realize, is it difficult? Yes, but it's possible. And I've never met anyone that reversed a lifestyle disease or lost weight that said it wasn't worth it. We just have to find ways. Maybe, I don't know how to motivate people, but maybe they can find ways within themselves to motivate themselves. In Weight Loss Wednesday, we do Transformation Tuesdays, where we have a gal now that's lost 300 pounds. And when you see her picture, you interviewed her, Heather Goodwin, and you're like, wow, if she can lose 300 pounds after being homeless, a single parent, and having cancer, maybe I can lose 10. Maybe I can eat some potato. So it's hard. I didn't really choose. This work chose me. Believe me, I didn't realize how hard it was going to be. I just thought, you do what I do. You go to True North, you listen to Dr. Goldhammer and Dr. Lyle or whatever Dr. McDougall says, you do it, boom, you're done. Because that's kind of how it was for me. Not immediately, but when I was ready to receive the information, I didn't realize that so many people were going to have such a hard time. But it is difficult. It takes diligence. I don't think it takes so much willpower, but it takes dedication, diligence, and just like anything, like if you wanted to be a great piano player, you don't just take one lesson. You got to keep practicing. And I think eventually it gets easier. And then it becomes so that this way of eating and being, especially when you get the slender body and the calm brain from eating in a way that doesn't drive you crazy, it becomes your preferred way of eating and being. And then it doesn't stay hard forever, I guess is what I want to say. It's much harder so when I studied French, it was much harder to learn French than it is now to speak French. Does that make sense? And this is learning a new language. And, there's going to be some bumps, but you can do it. I want people to know absolutely they can do it. And what I say to them, it's not a question of if you can do it. It really always was, how bad do you want it? And sometimes people have to hit rock bottom, get an unfortunate diagnosis. For me, that it wasn't like heart disease or diabetes. I was faced with having to have knee surgery because I was 60 pounds heavier than I am now. And I'm deathly afraid of anesthesia. So a lot of times people need like this wake up call. And Unfortunately, that's how it
Yeah.
is with a lot of people. So most people don't do this proactively unless they were born to, parents like Dr. Goldhammer. Uh, but it's worthwhile, and it can be really fun, and it can be really delicious, but you got to neuroadapt. You got to get all that crap out of your system, and learn a new way of cooking and being and thinking, and it's quite a change. It's quite a
Well,
change.
there's a light at the end of the tunnel, isn't there?
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's funny when people say, because especially around my birthday, they go, "Well, it's your birthday. You're not going to have a treat. You're not." And I go, "The slender body that eluded me for
Mm-hmm.
50 years, that's
Yeah.
the treat. I get the treat every day." And if people could only know what it's like to look and feel the way they are intended to, if they could have that, they would know that that's the treat. They wouldn't even want all this stuff, but because they're not there, and maybe they've never been there, it's theoretical to them. It's not. It doesn't seem possible, but this is the treat. I mean, never having been thin, I grew up the fat girl since age of 5. I was the fattest one in every grade till grade 12. Didn't have a boyfriend. Didn't get asked to the prom. You know, now I know what all the hullabaloo's about. I'm not going to apologize for being thin. It's wonderful. You're treated better. The clothes are cuter. You don't have the aches and pains. I love it, and I hope other people are inspired to not. Don't have to be skinny. You've
Right.
got to be healthy. And when you're healthy, and when you overcome your food addiction, the weight releases itself. It's a result of eating the wrong food. As Dr. McDougall says, it's the food. When you get the food right, the
Right.
body just follows naturally.
The fat you eat
Yeah.
is the fat you wear. I can hear them in my head.
That's right. Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think about that every day. And it's interesting because I'm coming up on 6 years without adding any fat, not even flax seeds or chia seeds. And I'm so proud to say that I just for the second time had my omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acid levels checked, and they are completely normal. So go figure.
Well, thank you, Chef AJ. You're
Well, thank you.
amazing.
Oh, well, so are you, and your little doggie is so cute.
That's Gracie.
Just saw her. She just changed position.
Hi, Gracie. Yep, that's her. Anyway, well,
Nice.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your
Thanks.
time.
Thank you.